I never thought our marriage would come to this. For years, I believed we had something special, a bond that few people manage to sustain over time. But that night, as we sat at the dinner table, my wife, Valeria, set down her fork, took a deep breath, and said something that landed like a physical blow. Diego, she began, I don't know how to say this, but I don't think I want to be intimate with you anymore. I froze. At first, I thought she was joking, but her tone was serious, almost cold. I tried a weak laugh to ease the tension, but her expression remained unchanged, as if she had rehearsed the line 100 times. What do you mean, Valeria? What are you saying? I asked, my mind struggling to process her words. She crossed her arms and looked away, avoiding my gaze. It's nothing personal. It's just, I don't feel it anymore. I'm tired, you know? The routine, work, everything. It's not about you. It's about me. A wave of confusion and rejection washed over me. What did she mean? It's not about me. We were married. We had been together for years. How could she make such a monumental decision without even discussing it with me first? I tried to compose myself. Okay, I understand you might be tired or stressed, but this is something we can work on together, don't you think? Maybe we could take a break, go on a trip, try something different. We just need to talk about it. But she shook her head, almost indifferently. Diego, this isn't something a trip is going to fix. I really don't want to continue with this part of our lives. I think you need to respect how I feel. That phrase hit me again. Respect how she felt? What about how I felt? My wife, the woman I had shared my life with, was essentially telling me there was no longer a place for me in a vital part of our relationship. I didn't want this to turn into a fight, so I chose my words carefully. Valeria, please, help me understand what's happening. Did I do something wrong? Have I stopped doing something you need? I truly want us to get through this together. She sighed again, this time with a clear note of impatience. Diego, I already told you, it's not about you. I've changed. People change, you know. I don't see why this has to be such a big deal. The calm I was trying to maintain began to crumble. Not a big deal, Valeria. We're married. This is part of what binds us together as a couple. How can you expect me to just accept this without at least trying to understand the real reason? I already gave you the reason, she replied sharply. I just don't want to anymore. It's that simple. If you can't accept that, then that's your problem. I stood up from the table, my heart pounding and my stomach churning. I didn't want to yell, but the way she spoke, as if this meant nothing, made me feel invisible, as if my feelings carried no weight at all. I went to our bedroom, trying to think clearly. I had always believed that problems in a marriage should be solved with dialogue and understanding, so I resolved not to give up. Maybe she was going through something she couldn't express, something that was making her so distant. Over the next few days, I did everything I could to reconnect with her. I tried surprising her with special dinners, flowers, and even planned a weekend at a spa in Monterey she had always talked about. But nothing seemed to work. She would offer a polite smile, then her eyes would drift back to her phone, or she would watch her shows alone on the sofa. I started noticing other things. Valeria, who was once affectionate and attentive, now seemed to exist in another world. She spent more and more time on her phone, and when I asked her anything, her answers were short, almost disinterested. She always found a way to deflect the conversation. It was as if everything else was more important than me. One night, I decided to bring it up again. Valeria, I know you said it's not about me, but something has changed between us. I just want to understand what's happening. She rolled her eyes. Diego, please. We've already talked about this. I just need space. Space? I asked, my frustration growing. Space for what? It's not like that, she said, her voice weary. I just want to feel good again, to feel like myself. Why do you keep pushing? Because I care about you, Valeria. I care about us. I can't just ignore the fact that you're pulling away. She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up her phone and began to scroll, effectively ending the conversation. That night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt an immense emptiness. What more could I do? I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. I just wanted us to be partners again. But it seemed that for her, none of that mattered anymore. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that Valeria had emotionally disconnected from our marriage. I began to reflect on everything, even things I had overlooked for years. From the beginning, she had been financially dependent on me. I had always wanted to be a supportive husband, someone she could rely on, so I took on most of the financial responsibilities. She used to say she needed to focus on her personal growth, but looking back, that growth never seemed to arrive. I began to wonder if she was with me for who I was, or simply for what I could provide. The thought gnawed at me, but I didn't want to believe it. Still, I kept trying. I thought that if I gave her more time, she would come around, but with each passing day, she only grew more distant. That's when I made a decision. If Valeria no longer saw me as her partner, then I could no longer be just her provider. I couldn't carry our marriage alone anymore. I decided to try something different. If the problem was routine, maybe I could break the cycle. I'd always heard that keeping the spark alive was key, so I went to a specialty store for couples. It was discreet, but my palms were still sweating as I walked in. I bought a few toys, some provocative lingerie, massage oils, and even a game that promised to ignite intimacy in a fun way. That evening, I prepared everything carefully. I lit candles, put on soft music, and decorated the bedroom with rose petals, something I knew she always found romantic. But when Valeria came home and saw what I had done, her reaction was explosive. She started screaming, calling me a degenerate, asking how I could even think of buying such things. Trying to keep my composure, I finally snapped. All right, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I won't insist anymore. But since things have changed, from now on, we each pay our own way. Nothing will be shared. Valeria let out a nervous laugh. You're joking, right? You know I can't afford everything on my own. No, Valeria, I'm not joking. And you know perfectly well you can manage. You always could have. But it was easier to let me carry the weight. This is ridiculous, Diego. Are you punishing me because I don't want to sleep with you? What kind of man does that? This isn't a punishment, Valeria. It's a reaction. I have spent years trying to make this marriage work, believing we had something special. But now I see that to you, I'm just a source of money and comfort, and I will not accept that anymore. She stared at me, a mixture of anger and disbelief in her eyes. And what do you expect me to do? Quit everything and get some random job? Humiliate myself? I expect you to take responsibility for your own life, Valeria. That's all. I've taken responsibility for mine and yours for years. Now it's your turn. If you no longer see me as your partner, then I will no longer sacrifice myself for someone who doesn't value me." She shot up from her seat, throwing her hands in the air. "You're unbelievable, Diego. After everything we've been through, you treat me like this? Like I'm disposable?" "No, Valeria. I'm just treating you the same way you've been treating me for months." She fell silent, her lips pressed into a thin line. "It's your decision," I continued. "Either you decide to be truly in this marriage and act as my partner, or we go our separate ways. But one way or another, I am done. I will not keep sacrificing for someone who doesn't appreciate me." She didn't respond. She just stormed out of the room, slamming the bedroom door behind her. I stood there for a long time, feeling a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief for having finally spoken my truth, and sadness because, deep down, I knew that conversation might be the end of our marriage. But for the first time in a long while, I felt free. Free from guilt. Free from the need to please someone who no longer cared. And in that moment, I decided it was time to start putting myself first. After that, things between us became even colder. Valeria barely spoke to me. I, in turn, began to disconnect completely. There was no reason to keep trying. For the first time in years, I realized it didn't hurt anymore. What once caused me anguish now only confirmed what I had known deep down. Our marriage had ended long before that conversation. The household expenses, which I had covered alone for years, were now split. As expected, Valeria did not take it well. But when she realized I wouldn't back down, she started finding excuses to be out of the house more often. A month after that decisive conversation, she called me into the living room. Her tone was flat. "I think it's best if we separate." I just nodded. There was nothing left to discuss. "All right. When are you planning to leave?" She seemed surprised by my calm response, perhaps expecting me to beg. But I had already made peace with the end. "I'll go to my parents' place this weekend. I've already packed some things," she said. "Okay, let me know if you need help with your bags." When Saturday came, I watched her leave. She didn't say much, and I felt no need to prolong the goodbye. I simply wished her well. She walked out the door without a backward glance. As her car turned the corner, I felt a great weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, the house was silent. But it wasn't a heavy, sad silence. It was a comforting, liberating one. Slowly, I began to adapt. I rediscovered things I had set aside for the marriage. I started cooking for myself again, something I'd always enjoyed. I picked up my guitar and started reading the books that had been gathering dust on the shelves for years. The solitude I once feared became my ally. There were no more arguments, no more demands, no more frustration. Just me, my space, and my peace. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Valeria eventually found a job to support herself. She never reached out, and I never felt the need to know more. Our time together was over, and I held no resentment. Through this process, I learned that solitude is not the opposite of happiness. On the contrary, it can be an opportunity to rebuild your life. Today, I live in peace. I have my home, my freedom, and above all, my dignity. My marriage to Valeria was a lesson, a painful one, yes, but a necessary one. And now, I can say with absolute certainty that sometimes The greatest act of self love is to let go of what no longer serves you